Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today we're taking a look at all the city building, simulation, and management games that we can look forward to in 2022. As with prior years, just to keep things organized, I have a separate video that I released earlier this week that focuses more on RTS, turn-based tactics, grand strategy, and 4X games. So if you're interested in those genres, make sure to check out the link in the description and pinned comment down below, and under the I at the top right corner of the screen. Any games you hear about in this list are games that I intend to cover on the channel through previews, reviews, let's plays, overviews, and more. So if you'd like to stay up to date with them and you're not already a subscriber, make sure you subscribe. As always, if there are any games that have piqued your interest either in this list or those that I've missed, let me know in the comments down below, as I'd love to know what you're looking forward to, and I'm always happy to add more to my plans for the year. Now, without any more time to waste, let's take a look at 20 of my most anticipated city building, sim, and management games set to release in 2022. Democracy 4 will be releasing out of early access on January 13th, and if you're unfamiliar with this series of games, I highly recommend checking it out if you're even remotely interested in the idea of managing an entire nation, warts and all. Democracy 4 has you take the role of the head of state or head of government, putting you in charge of a nation, establishing its policies and laws, making adjustments to countless facets of the country, all in order to secure a re-election by keeping the right people happy in the right ways. While the premise might sound simple, the task is anything but. Democracy 4 tries to simulate as many facets of a nation as possible, bringing up all kinds of potentially controversial or divisive topics, not really shying away from anything. Whether you're dealing with the media, forming coalition governments, enacting emergency powers, or dealing with inflation and corruption, you'll need to tackle all kinds of subject matter, from universal basic income to police body cameras to drug legalization, green energy, social welfare programs, and on and on and on. It's kind of ridiculous just how much there is. And the game is designed in a way that avoids bias from the developers, allowing you as the player to experiment as you wish, attempting to build the utopia or dystopia you desire if you can pull it off with your budget and without upsetting your voter base too much. Losing a re-election is one thing, but getting assassinated is another. The latter is a bit harder to recover from. You can abolish all taxes, you can put everything under government control, or you can ban multiple home ownership, and above all, you can finally live out your "if I were president, I'd do it better" hypotheticals. I'm really interested in Democracy 4's complex simulation, where all of these intertwined systems impact each other in logical ways, meaning every decision you make can have a drastic knock-on effect, and its open approach to the entire political spectrum is quite neat to see in action as well. On top of it all, it's great to see thorough mod support that'll allow folks to tweak and change and adjust how things work behind the scenes as they wish as well. I've always wanted to pick up the Democracy games, and I've had my eye on this one for quite some time, so I'm really quite happy to see it's finally coming out of early access this January. Prehistoric Kingdom is set to release into early access in April of this year, and it's looking like an absolutely amazing park manager game in which you build, design, and manage your own prehistoric park. If you're familiar with Planet Coaster or the more closely comparable Planet Zoo, imagine a game with the building tools brought by those games mixed with the joy of bringing long-extinct animals back to life. You'll see a great variety of animals, from mammoths to saber-toothed tigers to dinosaurs in both feathered and unfeathered forms. You'll be establishing sort of traditional enclosures as well as aviaries and more as you go about designing and building custom spaces for your guests and animals alike, including spaces for guests to sit down and eat and relax and rejuvenate before they resume their tours of your park and the spending that comes with it. The game is visually quite stunning. The animals are all depicted with such great detail in their models, textures, and animations. It really is quite fascinating to see some of these animals brought to life. I absolutely love it. As of now, the early access launch is going to have 22 animals, with more being added over the course of early access with updates. Dinosaurs will be the primary focus of these first 22, with a few mammals and some flyers too, and with many hundreds of pieces to build with, prefabs for those that don't care for building, day-night cycles, weather systems, and a full-fledged research system, as well as a tropical map, guest welfare, and more planned for the early access launch, which is not yet in the current beta state of the game, so if you've been playing the beta, don't look at that as a point of comparison. Early access is going to be bigger than the beta has been for the last little while, so there's lots to look forward to, whether you've already played Prehistoric Kingdom in its beta or alpha forms, or if this is your first time hearing about it. Honestly, between the creative freedom of the building tools, the management aspects, and bringing extinct animals back to life, there's lots of cool facets to Prehistoric Kingdom, and I'm eager to see how it all comes together and plays out. Fata Deum is slated for release into early access in Q2 of this year, and I am very excited for what seems to be, to put it quickly, a bit of a spiritual successor to those old Peter Molyneux games like Black and White, God games from what feels like an entirely different era, my childhood. In Fata Deum, you'll be competing with other gods for influence, gaining followers to help you get more powerful, using your mana to then manipulate your settlements and devotees to further their and your goals. You exist as an omniscient and near-omnipotent being, able to bless and inspire your townfolk or rule them through fear, either way helping them gather resources, build homes and farms and mills and more so that they might prosper, building temples dedicated to you as they either cower before your wrath or dance and frolic at your festivals. Perform miracles to help your own or to hurt their enemies, summoning demons and manipulating nature itself, and over time, as your influence grows, you'll see the world evolve alongside you and your competitors, gods of violence, deceit, fertility, and pleasure alike. The story-driven campaign mode will see you play as a young god rising to glory, and I'm curious to see if there will be a sandbox or more free-form mode to go alongside it, because there are some really interesting mechanics and systems being discussed in the dev diaries, and it would be nice to have the option to simply play around with them in a more free-form space. The devs have been posting relatively constant updates, and they've stayed on top of feedback they received during some demo periods as well as their backer alpha period, so things are looking pretty good for Fata Deum. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, by the way, in case some of you are realizing I've flip-flopped with my pronunciation. Fata Deum. Either way, feel free to correct me in the comments. The game's looking really good though. I'm excited to dive back into a genre that's been neglected for quite some time now, and with the really strong Black and White vibes I'm getting from everything I've seen here, this might be a great revival. Very curious to get my hands on it to check it out. Leysara Summit Kingdom is set to release sometime in 2022, and it looks like an absolutely amazing twist on the city builder genre, bringing great innovative mechanics alongside a beautiful art style. Leysara Summit Kingdom has you building cities atop mountains across both campaign and sandbox playthroughs, where you establish and manage multiple towns, each on unique mountains that feature their own specific traits and challenges. Each of these towns exists at the same time, working together through trade networks to meet each other's needs in an attempt to rebuild your kingdom, the Kingdom of Leysara. The different mountains will all have varied shapes, vegetation zones, resource availability, and weather conditions, and while some mountains will give you more room to farm, others will see you relying on animal husbandry or mineral extraction as the basis of your economy instead, asking you to trade with your other towns to meet needs that any one individual town can't. This takes city building to new heights, as you're not just managing a single city and its well-being, but you're trying to build a network of cities that support each other while each focuses on its own strengths as best as possible. To this effect, you'll be establishing transport networks that tackle the unique challenges of a vertical kingdom, building roads, bridges, shafts, and more to ensure a reliable, consistent, and optimized network that can keep up with growing town populations and demands. You'll need to prepare for inevitable avalanches, building around them, or otherwise defending against the rushing onslaught of snow, whether that's done using walls or intentionally triggering said avalanche while it still is trying to build up a little bit. Again, these are mechanics that are completely unique to the setting, adding some much-needed variety to this space, to this genre. It's like the ultimate challenge of building a temple on the summit of your mountains is unique to Leysara Summit Kingdom here. You need to figure out how to get resources and builders up there to get the task done, and when it is done, it's done to beautiful effect. The devs have clearly stated that Leysara Summit Kingdom is a pure city-building game, focused on the economy, resource management, and surviving despite the inhospitable environment. There's no combat or military aspects here, just you and a very literal mountain of a challenge. I'm really excited for Leysara Summit Kingdom. It's got some very neat ideas, it's doing some very different stuff, and it's looking very beautiful while doing it. Expect to see more of it on the channel. Ixion is due out sometime in 2022, and it had the briefest of reveal trailers that got me instantly excited and curious. Developed by the same folks that brought us the excellent Warhammer 40k Mechanicus comes a game that promises to blend city building with exploration and survival elements set amongst the stars in a space opera. You're the administrator of the Tikkun space station, and you're burdened with the responsibility of finding humanity a new home. You'll need to maintain the ship, manage resources, and keep the people on board alive and trusting of the corporation you represent, the corporation entrusted with this endeavor, and both the reveal trailer and the Steam page give ominous hints with regards to your potential troubles. Moral dilemmas, pursuit of new technologies, the dangers of space, and survival while exploring the void are all key components, and looking at some of the gameplay footage and screenshots, it looks like you'll be working with limited space across decks, organizing and arranging the various building blocks of a successful, safe station. The marketing for the game is sort of entering this meta space as well, as it uses platforms like Twitter to represent the agency behind the launch of the Tikkun, and I'm really curious to see the world the devs plan on building around the game to immerse us on the lead up to and after launch as well. We know to expect a narrative campaign, and the co-founder of Bulwark Studios has said that Frostpunk has served as a source of great inspiration as far as merging the narrative and core gameplay experience is concerned, and this is one of those times where my excitement is in part because of the gameplay mechanics being promised, but also in part because of the narrative around the game. Ixion is a king from Greek mythology who was punished for disrespecting humanity and the gods by being tied to an ever-spinning wheel of fire. If that evokes any space-related imagery, let it be the idea of the ever-spinning wheel that would be required to create artificial gravity on a space station. The word Tikkun has many connotations in Judaism. I'm going to butcher all these pronunciations, so forgive me, but Tikkun Olam is the concept of mending the world. Tohu and Tikkun are the two stages of existence, and there's a few more besides. The AI on the station is called Eden, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, and even the name of the company that you work for, Dolos, is a reference to the spirit of trickery in Greek mythology. This kind of stuff gets me giddy before I'm even in-game, so expect more coverage on this channel for sure, on the lead up to and after release. Sweet Transit is set to release into early access sometime in 2022, and it's coming in with a very unique approach to city building, putting the train at the heart of it all. In Sweet Transit, the railway is king, and trains are how the various cities expand from small villages to entire metropolises, with a focus on industry and intricate production lines, while keeping people's needs, wants, and happiness in mind too. Railway towns, or railroad towns, are a very real thing in the world, settlements that developed in the theoretical middle of nowhere because the railroad was being built across these vast expanses, and I'm curious to see exactly how Sweet Transit tackles the topic. We'll be going through the various eras of steam power and the invention of the combustion engine, and you'll be a pioneer of the industry, looking to keep citizens happy by bringing them what they need to survive and then eventually bringing them what they need to thrive. People will want to travel from place to place, and as your developments and buildings make certain places more attractive than others, you'll influence people's desires to travel accordingly, and then you'll have to sort of deal with those increased travel desires as well. Leaving certain places undesirable, however, will make local inhabitants unhappy, and they'll be less efficient, they'll work more poorly, and you might not get as much as you need out of those less desirable places as a result. You'll be starting with a single warehouse, and I imagine the world will start with small villages which your rail network will help grow, rather than starting from literally nothing. But at least one of the dev diaries implies that you won't even have small villages to start with, beginning instead with an empty, randomly generated map that you're setting out to colonize from scratch by attracting people over to your many villages and cities as you, again, build them from the ground up. The latter sounds more interesting to me, but truth be told, I'd be cool with either. You'll be connecting these starting settlements to transport people around between platforms and stations so they can get to work or tend to their needs otherwise, working around the landscape and investing in production chains based on available resources to meet the needs of and grow these villages, which in turn will ask for more things, which means you'll need to sort out more production lines and the transport of their goods, so on and so forth, getting increasingly complex as you go along. But beyond production chains that presumably spread across multiple villages, you'll also need to keep an eye on needs like accommodation and basics like food and water to ensure workers are happy and well, working optimally without losing any productivity. Like I mentioned earlier, if a space is very unattractive, people don't really want to work as hard, they don't want to work as well, they don't feel so good about, life in general, and so they're less efficient And you need to tackle that, not just by providing food and water, but by making beautiful towns for everybody. And then, again, dealing with the tourism and stuff that comes as a result of all that. Between all this and full mod support and Steam Workshop integration, Sweet Transit has really piqued my curiosity. And with about 14 dev diaries out there showing all sorts of great visuals and gameplay complexities, I am really excited to check this one out. From managing signals and junctions and optimal track curvatures to organizing routes and lines to ensuring you have room for expansion and future development, Sweet Transit is looking like a very beautiful and compelling game, and you can bet you'll see more of it on the channel. War Hospital is set to release in Q4 of this year, and it's coming in hot with a very interesting premise. You play as Major Henry Wells, retired British combat medic, drafted back and thrown into the harsh reality of a world at war. It's 1917, and you're the last hope for soldiers on the French front. Yup, it's a World War I game, but rather than leading soldiers into battle or building bases and recruiting units to go forth and kill, you're in charge of saving lives instead. You'll be using World War I medical technology in the confines of a realistically depicted British field hospital on the French front, trying to keep your staff and soldiers alike hopeful and alive, managing resources, building facilities, and evolving your tools and methodologies to keep them alive and safe, if not fighting. There are some very interesting dev diaries out there already giving some insight into the design philosophy, like how to make tiny little units on an RTS-style map actually feel like people that deserve or need saving, how to get the player to care about each individual, and how to present moral dilemmas with actual weight. Some very interesting sort of theorizing and conversations going on in the dev diaries, and that really intrigued me. I like seeing that kind of conversation from the devs because it really gives you some insight into where they're coming from. And these devs are working alongside the British Imperial War Museum, so we can expect an air of authenticity to what looks like a very unique type of management game set in the middle of an active war zone. I get very strong Frostpunk vibes off of this one, not just in the little UI that we've seen, but also in the way the devs have been talking about the game so far too. I'm very intrigued, and I cannot wait to see more. Kerbal Space Program 2 is set to release sometime in 2022 and is looking to fill some pretty massive shoes following up from KSP 1, which only just saw the end of its sustained development around August of last year. If you follow this channel even a little bit, you've probably heard me say time and time again that I quite like nerding out about space, and Kerbal Space Program has always felt like the most grounded and realistic of space exploration experiences out there, allowing you to build your own spaceships, rockets, vehicles, and more, exploring your solar system and either taking on challenges in a career mode with contracts and all, or embracing a more sandbox approach, challenging yourself to do all manner of wild or grounded space exploration using either the base game or any of the countless mods out there. Kerbal Space Program 2 promises to do more of the same, rebuilt from the ground up to push the game further than before, tapping into newer technology not just for the game to run on, but also for the player to use as far as space exploration is concerned. Near-future technology is going to be introduced in KSP2, allowing you to establish space colonies that have their own physics challenges and opportunities for exploration, and you'll even be able to build vehicles at those colonies to help push space exploration beyond your starting solar system. Interstellar travel and interstellar travel-related technology all sounds very exciting, and the updated art looks absolutely fantastic too, still retaining the cartoonish charm of the first game, but upgrading it in just the right ways to modernize the aesthetic, especially when it comes to the planetary surfaces themselves. Multiplayer will be included as part of the base game, and mod support will be kept in mind too, considering how integral it was to the massive success of the first game, at least in my opinion. We've seen some really good stuff across dev diaries and show and tell highlights, including quality of life changes, the continued dedication to realistic space exploration, and so much more that is just so very exciting to me as a fan of all the topics at hand, and of course, the predecessor as well. You can expect a lot of coverage on the channel as we get closer to release especially, and I might even do a deep dive video on all there is to talk about already, if you're interested. Let me know down below. I play quite a bit of the first game, I just don't really do videos on it, but I want to dive into KSP2 on the channel for sure. Farthest Frontier is set to release into early access sometime in 2022, and it's looking like a rather beautiful and complex city builder from the folks that brought us Grim Dawn. As the name might imply, you're establishing your town at the edge of the known world, pushing into the untamed wilderness of the frontier as you harvest raw materials, hunt, fish, farm, and manufacture goods to sustain your growing population and town's needs. The game really seems to embrace the unique difficulties with trying to settle in an unfamiliar and distant land. You'll fight for survival against outside threats and the elements alike, building wooden palisades and stone walls, towers, and barracks to train soldiers with which to defend against raiders who would do you harm. And if it isn't outside invaders, disease will kill your settlement from within if you're not careful in managing clean water and balanced diets. Dysentery, rabies, scurvy, and tetanus can all cause trouble, and if you don't properly manage rodent populations, either by securing your food and disposing of your waste properly, or by getting rat catchers involved, you might find yourself dealing with the bubonic plague. Outside of the advertised dozens of diseases, the game boasts an extremely detailed farming system where you'll need to choose from a variety of crops with different characteristics, using crop rotation to maintain fertility while avoiding weather-related troubles, pests, and disease among the crops alike. You'll need to improve your farming capabilities and establish ideal growing conditions for your crops, and that's just farming we're talking about. There are 50 different buildings you'll need to use to go from a tiny town to a proper city, with each upgrading through tiers to either house more people or produce any of these 60 end products more efficiently. Local resources will determine what you can produce yourself versus what needs to be traded in, and you'll need to ensure that local fauna doesn't eat up your crops or attack your citizens either, while at the same time fighting off the depletion of your groundwater reserves. There are so many interesting moving parts to this game that set it apart from other survival city builders, and I'm very curious to see it all come together. Gord is set to release sometime in 2022 and is pitching itself as a single-player adventure strategy game, but its focus on population management, city building, and survival elements have me most curious. The game looks absolutely gorgeous, and it has some really interesting mechanics as you adventure in this dark fantasy setting where you lead your people into forbidden lands, completing quests to ensure the survival of your faction. You'll need to build structures of all kinds, upgrading them over time to turn your settlement into a defensible fortress to help fend off the constant attacks from enemy tribes, monsters, and some mysterious powers alike. AI-driven quests will send you adventuring outside your walls, where main objectives will guide you through larger gameplay beats, with smaller side quests and random encounters to keep you engaged in other ways, learning more about the world you inhabit, hunting down legendary beasts, and perhaps more permanently eliminating threats to your people. Procedural generation will help with replayability, allowing you to adjust primary objectives, level size, the challenge provided by the raids, what kind of environment and enemies you'll be up against, how harsh the weather conditions might be, and more besides. You'll need to manage the health of your population, helping them avoid sickness and hunger, and should they suffer either of these or mental trauma, you'll see their sanity and burden levels take a hit. And when either of these reach a critical point, you might see some lash out, leave, or otherwise suffer from a breakdown. Pray to get the aid of the gods, using incantations to help defend and attack, hiding from your enemies, taking control of beasts, and more as you engage in this world inspired by Slavic myth. Gord is looking absolutely fantastic, and I cannot wait to check it out. Potion Tycoon is listed as coming soon, developed by the same folks behind the excellent Deep Sky Derelicts, promising a fun tycoon game with a full market simulation, dynamic events, production, price, and staff management, and a whole system of research and development and experimentation. I quite like games centered around potion mixing and alchemy, and it seems that this kind of experimentation is a prominent part of Potion Tycoon, encouraging you to experiment with ingredients and finding new ways to combine them to make new potion types, from healing potions to summoning and invisibility potions. The fantastical setting opens up options beyond your typical pharmacist as you produce potions for adventurers, using all sorts of newly researched equipment as you go about uncovering newer and newer ingredients, sending out search parties and foragers to collect them as needed. You'll be hiring and managing your staff as they gain experience and level up, and you'll need to build, manage, and decorate your storefront, as well as your production facilities, to make sure customers are happy and satisfied. The screenshots reveal some really fun details to the actual potion crafting process, showing how you can develop marketing strategies around each of your potions, and how you can design their containers for improved appeal as well, and how you might have to deal with VIP orders as a way to improve how renowned your establishment is, while news articles will warn you of upcoming trends so you can prepare to maximize profits based on them. I absolutely love the aesthetic, I love the concept, I love that the game is taking itself seriously despite the sort of quirky or otherwise unexplored topics. I'm really excited for this one. Park Beyond is set to release sometime in 2022, and this is one of those games whose reveal had me grinning ear to ear. I was really pleased to see a new theme park management game, having played a fair bit of Roller Coaster Tycoon in my time, and considering I sort of missed the boat on Planet Coaster, I was hoping for something new to come along. Even the most free form of games in this genre tend to stay somewhat grounded. Even if you're allowed to build custom roller coasters that have more loops than the legal limit, the laws of physics stay in place, as do safety regulations. But to all that, Park Beyond says nope. The premise here is to build a park of your dreams, unrestricted by things like gravity, taking control of a struggling company and building all manner of rule-bending rides. The Steam page only mentions a story-driven campaign mode, but I'm hoping there's more of a free-form mode available as well, a sandbox mode or something. From the sounds of things, the game's not just about making funky rides though, as various monitoring tools will give you access to all sorts of data with which to improve your park experience. Again, this is a tycoon or management game, right? So from research and development to marketing to shop designs and staff members, you'll be managing all aspects of operating a theme park, as you can probably expect, with the added fun of things like, yes, roller coasters with cannons that launch the cars off the tracks or have jumps built into them. There's a showcase of how the roller coaster editor works, which will likely be a big focus of any theme park game, and I'm really excited to see how creative the devs actually get with non-roller coaster elements too. This was a very pleasant surprise when it was revealed, and I cannot wait to check it out. 2 Point Campus is set to release sometime in 2022, and it promises to bring that same quirky, zany, comedic approach of 2 Point Hospital to the world of post-secondary education. You'll be building your campus, including its outdoor and indoor spaces both, and you'll be hiring and managing staff to keep the spaces well kept and functional. You'll teach your students all kinds of important life skills across the various courses, including night school, where they'll learn how to duel and joust, salivatory gastronomy, where they'll learn how to make giant pizzas and pies, and from the looks of things, you'll be teaching people how to DJ, cast spells, be the best clowns they can be, and more. You'll manage a sports team, decorate dorms, stock cafeterias, and seemingly manage extracurricular activities like robotics classes, band, and school parties. Students will all have individual personalities, wants, and needs, and your school clubs, societies, and job opportunities might help them flourish as they try to make friends, develop relationships, and ultimately graduate into the real world, for which they'll be amply prepared under your tutelage. The devs have said the hope is to create what they call a curated sandbox experience, where players are given a bunch of objectives that they can tackle as they please at their own pace, as school goes from in-session to out-of-session for the summer holidays. I am really excited for 2 Point Campus. I always think a management game that can balance gags and serious management against each other is a good time, and 2 Point Campus looks like it'll deliver on both fronts. Frostpunk 2 is currently sitting with a TBA release date, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a winter 2022 release, and I am very excited for what's to come. The first game was an absolute game changer when it comes to city building titles, and I'm not just being punny here. From its Industrial Revolution Ice Age setting to its radial city building layout to its focus on moral dilemmas and decision making that actually have an impact beyond a couple of numbers here and there, Frostpunk was a huge hit in my and many others' books. In Frostpunk 2, oil takes the center stage as conflicts between various factions result in rising tensions while temperatures continue to drop during this horrendous ice age. The developers are hoping to ramp up the production value on a game that already looked, felt, and played fantastically, and they're hoping to do more than just a sequel. They want to introduce a wider array of choices that help you shape your societies and cities, building on the conflicts of the first game, which they eloquently outline as survival versus human values. I'm really interested to see how else Frostpunk 2 innovates on the genre, since the first game was such an absolutely different experience from anything else available at the time, and to be honest, anything available even now. The devs are clearly a creative bunch, so I haven't seen any gameplay footage. There's just this one trailer and a couple of, advertising and marketing pieces put out there, but just because of what they managed to pull off with Frostpunk 1, I am tremendously excited for Frostpunk 2, and I cannot wait to see how it advances the world and concepts of the first title. The Settlers sounds like it's going to be coming back real soon. I was very excited for the return of the Settlers year after year, and then in July or so of 2020, the game was delayed indefinitely, much to my and many others' dismay. And then, all of a sudden, close to the end of last year, The Settlers was re-announced, and now there's a website that promises news for the game in January of 2022, this month. at least if you're watching this video in January of 2022. Now, this website offers people a chance to sign up and play early, and that tells me that even though the game was delayed indefinitely, it was still being worked on and might soon be ready for an early access launch, or something that's a little different from what was originally being planned. I noticed that the developer is now listed as Ubisoft Dusseldorf, if that's how you pronounce that, as opposed to Ubisoft Blue Byte, so maybe there are some organizational changes that put the Settlers on the chopping block? Either way, I'm really excited to see that the series is making a comeback, and I'm glad that it's not disappeared completely after all. This new entry into the series promises more of the same city building and hallmark complex supply chain management, alongside new ways to compete with other nations, including heroic tournaments and war. I'm not sure how much of the game's core premise has changed, but the single-player campaign was going to be about arriving at a new continent and settling it, as the name might suggest. There used to be a dev blog with constant updates showing off interesting buildings and supply chain ideas, but without any of that to reference anymore, I don't want to mislead, but I did want to bring the revival of the Settlers to your attention. Again, it sounds like we're getting some early access model or beta model or something sometime soon. That sort of model seems to be becoming more and more popular. We saw or are seeing it rather with Company of Heroes as well, with their kind of co-development model as they're calling it, so we'll see what happens, and you'll hear about it on this channel as the situation develops. Builders of Egypt is finally set to release in Q1 of this year, with a prologue available to play right now on Steam if you're interested. I've been looking forward to this game for quite some time now, so it feels good to finally see it coming out. Yes, it's being published by Playway, but it's one of the games that seems to actually be making it to the finish line, and in style too. I'm not here to talk about the potential controversies there, and though I'm not holding my breath on that Q1 timeline, the developers have been actively posting tons of dev blogs, with the 33rd having just released on the 30th of December, and they've been showing off some really cool visuals, systems, and mechanics, from farms and meadows of different kinds for different types of food, to fire stations and tax collectors and viziers' offices and courts. We're seeing everything from complex production chains that require mining and farming, to law and order and upgradable buildings, as well as a class hierarchy system that determines wants, needs, and occupations of your citizens. Working around the ebbing and flowing of the Nile plays a key role, as any ancient Egypt-centered city builder should, and you'll be fishing, hunting, and farming for the purposes of food and resource production, planning distribution through granaries and bazaars that operate based on proximity to each other and to housing, and anything you can't produce yourself, you'll be trading, importing and exporting to manage your economy and needs, and you'll also be able to manufacture weapons and chariots for use in military endeavors, fighting off foreign invaders and participating in offensive actions too, if I am understanding these dev diaries correctly. You'll build all sorts of wonders, obelisks, mastabas, pyramids, and more, and honestly, it all gives me a very Pharaoh-like vibe, if you're familiar with those old Sierra city builders. This is feeling like one to very much look forward to. The Wandering Village was aiming for a Q4 2021 release date, but is now listed as TBD. Either way, Stray Fawn Studio is up to something really interesting with a concept here, putting you in charge of a group of people who have settled on the back of a giant, wandering creature. Your space is limited as a result of this odd and whimsical setting, and you'll need to be judicious with your use of space as you build a city, set up farms and production chains, and take care of the needs of your people. The creature itself can be considered a part of the village, and its health and well-being needs to be maintained as it travels from biome to biome, bringing new threats and opportunities alongside its travels. Recent dev diaries have shown some research trees and animal-specific buildings too, and we've seen a glimpse of the mysterious world map and some of the further improved and developed art too. The game is very unique in its style, its mechanics, and its concept as a whole, and I cannot wait to see how it all comes together. They had a very successful Kickstarter campaign, they've been posting relatively consistent and constant dev diaries, and it all looks very promising. I love a good unique idea in this space, and this is one of the most unique ones I've seen for the year coming up. Blooming Business Casino is listed as coming soon, dropping into early access later this year, and looks like a very interesting management game that puts you in charge of a retro casino. Don't let the adorable art style and animal patrons fool you. Blooming Business Casino is a deep tycoon game where you build, decorate, design, and manage your retro-style casino, growing it over time as you tackle everything from marketing to staffing, monitoring the specific needs and expectations of your clients, ensuring that they're happy and spending money, hopefully losing it all to the house. I'm curious about the supposed narrative events that will trigger over the course of gameplay, with your management style and strategies supposedly triggering these different narrative events that you'll have influence over. Each game in your casino can be customized in various ways, as can the bar and what and how it serves, and you'll have two types of staff to manage as well: regular employees who tackle most tasks, and pit bosses who you can specialize to help in very specific ways depending on how they level up over time. But it's been suggested that these very same pit bosses might stab you in the back through narrative events, asking for raises, harassing regulars to your casino and making them upset, and more. But you can also use said pit bosses to help get rid of troublemakers, dropping people off in the middle of nowhere for you, or doing God knows what else. The devs have been very responsive to feedback. The game clearly has a lot to offer already, and I'm really interested in seeing how it proceeds through early access and beyond. Again, we're looking at a game which, has a very quirky, fun, and just whimsical look, but is dealing with some potentially dark topics. I mean, pit bosses that can disappear people. Like, really curious how it all comes together. This seems like a really fun one. Anvil Saga is set to release sometime in 2022, and having played the demo during one of the Steam Next Fests from last year, I can wholeheartedly say I am very pumped to see how the final game plays out. You play a blacksmith in the medieval era, responsible for managing your shop, its staff, its acquisition of resources, its financials, and more. You'll be following through a storyline where decisions you make will have an impact, not just on what tasks you'll need to fulfill, but what might happen to the very land upon which you live and work. And what happens to your head. It is the medieval era, and if you upset the wrong people, well, there are consequences, right? Wars are waged, and your home changes hands. Will you pay tax to the new king? You have a crush on a local noble's daughter. Will you put in an extra effort for her? As you improve your facilities and build a larger shop, you'll start to attract more impressive customers, and as you try to maintain your reputation, you'll find yourself getting VIP requests and bulk orders, as well as special commissions like wandering knights that demand one-of-a-kind swords. Your staff will all have their own quirks, weaknesses, and strengths, and you'll need to manage their happiness and well-being, improving them over time to keep up with the growing operation. Anvil Saga has a very fun art style, a very fun premise, and a very fun set of management tools and requirements that I think work very nicely together. The demo was quite promising, and I look forward to its final release later this year. Full Metal Sergeant is set to release in late 2022, and while it definitely looks like one of the simpler games on this list, it also looks like one of the cheekier of the lot, focusing on a topic that I don't think I've seen get much attention before, if any. It sounds like Full Metal Sergeant is a game that you play short runs of multiple times, with 12 in-game weeks in each run to prepare your recruits and turn them into soldiers. You'll be setting various exercise regimens for them, making them more capable and potentially specializing them as divers or paratroopers and the like, and you'll be competing with other boot camps in competition, all in an effort to raise your own camp's prestige. Prestige which you then use in turn to upgrade your camp, rinse and repeat. Again, this looks like one of the simpler and smaller titles of the lot, but I'm always a fan of games like FTL Faster Than Light or Into the Breach, etc., that are often seemingly small, self-contained play sessions that you can keep coming back to time and time again, racking up those hours. I'll be keeping an eye on it, and you'll likely see me revisit it closer to or shortly after release to see if it lives up to my curiosity and expectations. But there you have it, 20 games for 2022 that should scratch any sim, management, and city building itches you might have. Whether you're looking for something historical or fantastical, I think I've got you covered. Don't forget to check out my other video that I released earlier this week about 20 other games for 2022 falling under, RTS, tactical, 4X, and grand strategy genres. You'll be very interested in seeing some of them, I think. There's a lot of overlap in some of these, genres, I would say. But again, to keep things organized and to keep videos as short as possible at 40-something minutes long, I figured we'd split them up into two. So check out the link in the description and pinned comment down below under the I at the top right corner of the screen as well. If there are any games that you're particularly excited for, any games you think I've missed, or any on this list, again, that you think are looking especially cool, let me know down below. It really helps me kind of decide what to do for the year ahead, and there's a lot of exciting stuff coming, so I'd be curious to know your opinions. As always, folks, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.